All right, we are going to go ahead and get started with our notes for parallel and perpendicular lines. So please put your name and date at the top up here. Before we get started learning about parallel and perpendicular lines and their slopes, we're just going to do another really quick review of what slope is. So there are 4 different kinds of slopes that we've already talked about. Positive slopes that slope up, negative slopes that slope down. Our undefined slopes are those vertical ones. I'm going to write the word vertical here to remind you. And then 0 are those horizontal slopes. I'm going to write the word horizontal here. So you might remember these from Slope Dude or just any other way that you have learned them, but those are the 4 different types of slope. And again, to remind ourselves of the coordinates in each quadrant, let's look at quadrant 1 here. Our x values are always positive in quadrant 1, as well as our y values. If I move to quadrant 2, my x value is negative, and my y value is positive. In quadrant 3, both the x and y values are negative. And then in quadrant 4, our x value is positive, and our y value is negative. So we have a nice little picture over here of 4 different lines. So we can look at these slopes. So I'm going to color these different colors. This blue one right here is a positive slope. This next line here that I'm going to color orange, you guys can draw arrows to them. That one has a negative slope. Then we have our undefined slope over here that I'm coloring purple. So our undefined slope again is vertical. And then last but not least, our horizontal line has our 0 slope that I'm writing here in red. So you can draw little arrows to them if that will help you find which of the lines has which slope. All right. Just a little bit more quick review on what slope is. If we look at this first example, let's plot the points. So point A, I move over to the right 3 and up 2. And then point B here, I'm going to move to the left -1 and down -1. And then I can connect these points to find the line that goes through them. To find my slope, I measure the rise over the run, So I start down here. I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3 units, and then I'm going to run over to the right 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So my rise over my run was 3 units up and 4 units over. And I also noticed that this slope is positive. All right, we're going to go ahead and save the rest of these slope examples for class tomorrow. So please flip your paper over and we're going to get started with parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines look like this. They are lines that never touch. The lines never touch. Those are parallel lines. So since they move in the same direction and they never touch, parallel slopes are equal. Parallel slopes are equal. On the other hand, perpendicular lines do run into each other. So in examples right here, kind of looks like our coordinate grid, our x and our y axes. So perpendicular lines do run into each other. So since they run into each other, they do not have the same slopes. Their slopes are opposite, reciprocals. Opposite reciprocals. All right, so let's look at some examples. So there are 2 points here, 1, 3, and -1, 1 that I'm going to give you. You can go ahead and plot those and connect the line between them. So 1, 3 and -1, 1. And connect the line between them. So if I look at this, I'm going to count my slope, so my rise over my run. So my rise is 1, 2, and my run is 1, 2. both in the positive direction, so my slope is 2 over 2, or 1. All right, so go ahead and plot the point 3, 1. 3, 1. So if I have that point, I'm going to find another point that has the same slope, so that it is perpendicular, the same slope. So if I use my slope of 2 over 2, or 1, I'm going to rise up 2 and run 2. And that gives me another point right there, so I can connect those lines, and I see that that red line I just found has the same slope. So I rise 1, 2, and I run 1, 2. I rise over my run. It's the exact same. So those are examples of parallel lines. All right, let's look at perpendicular lines. Again, plot these points for me, 1, 3, and -1, 1. So the same points that we just used, 1, 3, and -1, 1. Connect that into a line. All right, so we said that our slope, we can write that as the letter M, was 2 over 2, which equals 1. So we know that our slope, I'm going to write M, for our perpendicular line is going to be the opposite reciprocal. So an example up here, if the slope is positive 1 over 4, the opposite refers to that sign. So since it's positive, the opposite would be negative. And then since we have the fraction 1 over 4, reciprocal is the opposite fraction. You flip it. So 1 over 4 becomes 4 over 1. So this right here is an example of perpendicular slopes. So if my slope is positive 2 over 2, I know since it's positive it's going to become a negative slope now. Since they're the same number, it's not too tricky. The 2's just flip. It is the reciprocal, but it does look the same, 2 over 2. So that simplifies to -1. So if I start at one of my points here, I'm going to start at this point that I have, and I'm going to use my opposite reciprocal slope to find a perpendicular line. So I'm going to rise down 2 and then run to the right 2. And it ends me up at a point right here. And then if I connect my line between those points, you'll see that this new line we just drew is perpendicular to this original line. But we're going to leave all this stuff for class tomorrow. So you may do it now if you want, but it is not for homework. What we are going to do is slide all the way down here to this last problem. So line R contains the point 0, 0, and 2, -1. So that's this line right here. Select 3 points on the line that are parallel to line R and pass through point N. So I have point N right here, and I want to find 3 of these points that create a parallel line. So if I first find the slope of this line, I'm going to find the rise over the run. So I'm going to pick those 2 points they gave me, 0, 0, and 2, -1, and find the rise over the run. So I rise up 1, and I run to the left 2. So it's going to be 1 over -2. Since it's a parallel line, it's going to be the same slope as this, and it needs to pass through point N. So I'm going to start at point N and use my slope, because I want the same slope, to find some other points. So if I rise up 1 and run over 2 to the left, I'm going to end up at the point -1, 3. I'm going to notice that that is point E right here, so that's one of my correct answers. All right, let's do it again. If I rise up 1 and over to the left, -2, I end up at the point -3, 4, which is also one of the correct answers, F. And then I need to find one more, but I'm out of room up here, so I'm going to move backwards, go down this way. So I'm going to rise down 1, so since I went negative that way, now I need to do positive 2. And that puts me at the point 3, 1, which, look at that, that's point B. There we go. We found those 3 points, and if you want to go ahead and connect those points, you'll see that that new line is parallel to the original line. All right, great job, guys. Thank you for listening and following along. Please bring this to class tomorrow so we can finish it up.